Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Todd's podcast. We have quite a guest for you today. He was born in Tampa, grew up in Lakeland, graduated from Lakeland High School so long ago, the football team wasn't even winning championships, he said. He's also a graduate of Polk Community College and the University of Florida. Go Gators. He was the Florida Salesman of the Year for Borden Foods before moving back to Lakeland and working with the Florida Phosphate Council and Agricove Phosphate. He went to work at Farm Credit of Central Florida and retired as Director of Marketing and Government Affairs in 2016 after 30 years. I can't believe it's been that long since you retired.
Oh, I'm telling you, it seems, I look up and it's been almost 10 years ago.
I know it. In 97, he was named the National Marketer of the Year in the nationwide Farm Credit System. Is that the National BSer of the Year? Is that what that award was for? Or did you have tangible results as something you were doing?
Public relations has been defined as the fine art of getting caught in the act of doing something right.
There you go. He has two children he's very proud of, Michael and Brittany. Michael is president of Dixie Jet and Rotor, and Brittany is a judge in Tallahassee. They got 4 wonderful grandsons, and he's happily married to his wife, Andrea. He's been hosting the Ozone on WLKF Radio for 20 years through the generosity of Art and Bonnie Robotham. Our guest today is Hall of Fame radio broadcaster Ronnie Ocean, or as I like to call him, the great Ron O'Connor, the man, the myth, the legend, the heartthrob of every 85-year-old woman from Mulberry to Plant City. Ron, welcome.
Well, thank you. You know, I am listed on the senior dating site. It's called Carbon Dating.
Carbon Dating. Hopefully you don't have to cut a toe off to figure out how old you are. The great thing about Ron, and there are many, but one of the things we're talking about today is he was just inducted into the Polk County Sports Hall of Fame just a few days ago on June 17th. He's a world traveler. He's been a longtime friend of mine, a longtime friend of our families. His younger brother and I, Glenn, were fraternity brothers, as Ron was a fraternity brother, but he was old and carbon dating way back then before I got there. But Glenn, his brother, and I were the same age. And Ron enjoys traveling, so I had to get him in between trips around the world. And so we're lucky to have him here today. Welcome, Ron. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be included among the distinguished guests you've had.
We actually have had some guests, so the bar is raised. So, you know, if you don't perform very well, this episode can be edited down to about 17 minutes. So bring your A game, not your B game, but we need your A game today.
I'll do my best.
Okay. All right. So you went to University of Florida. You were an ATO there. What was your major?
I was a broadcasting major.
Okay. So you always felt like this is something you wanted to do. You just never had the avenue to get into the broadcasting business?
That's correct. You know, when I got out, I went down and did a television spot down in Bonita Springs, a little television station. And the guy told me, he said, Ron, he said, I'd like to hire you, but you're the wrong color and gender.
He said you have a face for radio, and
Exactly.
and the rest was history.
Yeah, I was in makeup for about 3 hours.
We got no more makeup. Please go home. Okay, so let's talk a little about your show and the history. We're going to talk some sports as we get into this thing, if you're willing to do that. How did you come up with the name for your show? How did you come up with your radio name?
My daughter was the inspiration for a lot of it. When she graduated...
Aren't they always?
They are.
If you listen to your kids, they usually make you smarter.
Especially daughters.
Yes.
They have a way
Yep.
of getting you to do what they want you to do.
Yes.
She had graduated from the University of Florida, and she had a history degree. And I told her when she decided to change majors, I said, you're either going to be a teacher or you're going to go to law school. And so when she graduated, I said, I challenge you to go to law school. She did, and now she's a judge. And so she turned the tables on me, and she said, okay, you've always wanted to have a call-in sports show. I challenge you to do the same thing. So I went to Art Robotham, and he was kind enough to let me do it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's how it got started. And she actually came up with the name Ozone. Now, the Ronnie Ocean, I had heard of an old broadcaster way back named Bobby Ocean.
Okay.
And I said, I like that name.
The first time I heard it, I didn't even know it was you. I mean, heard the name. I said, Ronnie Ocean, I think I know that guy. And
You're not the only one.
yeah. So your show, you always want to do sports call in, talk in, live interviews. I know you do a little bit of everything, and you've been doing it 20 years. Tell us a little bit about the show, how often it's on, how to find it, because you can't get it on the east side of the county on AM radio after 7 o'clock.
We're simulcast now on 96.7 FM, and we've gotten calls from Lake Wales.
Wow.
On that. But the 14:30 a.m., you're right, that doesn't carry very far. And at night, it barely gets out of the parking lot.
I can assure you it doesn't make it past the landfill. Not that the landfill is any great landmark, but Ron and I are both struggling with a weak voice this morning, so I apologize for that. I think the allergies are getting me. How do you market your show?
You know, there are promos that they run periodically. And when we have big-time guests on, and we usually have them, do a show promo. Hi, this is Todd Dantzler, former city commissioner and all-time great. You're listening to Ronnie O and Coach Joe in the O-Zone.
Well, I agree. That's how we do it. But you've got a company behind you marketing it, correct? And they're selling ads for you?
No, I actually sold the ads on my show.
Oh, really?
We have Allied Scrap, which is an old buddy of mine, Frank Gilia, that I've known for 60 years. And he just did it out of the goodness of his heart. And then we also have Foshi Jewelers.
Okay.
And then we have Ale House on the south side.
Okay.
Every week we have a sports quiz, and the quiz winner gets to go out to Ale House, take $30 off their tab.
Nice. Chico bail bonds, they had used up all their money in Bad News Bears.
Yeah,
is that why
dadgummit.
you couldn't get Chico? Eli, maybe you can start selling some ads and some promotions for us.
Yeah, I'll get right on that.
This is the support I get around here. Do you do it live? I mean, yours is a radio show and not a podcast like this one.
Correct.
And
it is live. And we do have some recorded interviews at
correct.
times.
Does it make you a little more nervous doing it live? Of say, what is this guy or gal going to say?
No, not really. I think part of doing the show, what I've learned, is the art of asking questions. Asking open-ended questions. Don't ask somebody a yes or no question.
Right.
And, try to listen to something they say, and something they say will spur my next question.
Right. I found I've become a better listener by doing this. You're our 43rd, 44th show that we're recording. And when I first started, I had 6 or 7 pages of notes. And I'm asking every question in order. And Grady Judd, our sheriff, was our guest. And I was 5 minutes in, and he was already on page 5 of my notes, and I was halfway through page 1. And I'm thinking, how do I get back to here? And we did. But if you listen to the guest and listen to what they say, it really comes across as a little bit better show. And I do better at that than I used to.
It's funny you say that. The first time I did the show, I thought, well, I'm going to get a lot of calls. My first show, I did not get a single call.
You didn't have your daughter planning to call you? Hey,
no.
Honey, call me. If there's dead air, call me.
I was so cocky. I said, I'm going to get a lot of calls. No, sir. So with about 10 minutes left, I've run out of material. And I'm like, I'm the only one here. What am I going to do? So I just started talking about things that I knew a lot about.
Yeah. Hang on, we got a call from Steve Spurrier, who's calling in from Gainesville.
Yeah.
Bad connection. What are you saying, Steve? I'll interpret it. What's your secret to getting high-profile guests? Because you've had some pretty significant people on there.
A lot of it is just good luck. The other part is perseverance. It took me 6 weeks to get Roger Staubach. He and his secretary and I got to be close personal friends. And I think what finally got him to come on was he had a real estate office in Tampa and one in Orlando. And I told her, I said, we're midway between Tampa and Orlando. I didn't tell her that the station's signal didn't carry out of the parking lot. But he was a very gracious guest and a brilliant guy.
Did he come on or did he call in?
He called in.
Okay. I mean, guys like that, they have these stories that they've just lived their lives that are so interesting and things that maybe you've seen on TV or you've heard, and now you're talking to them first person.
I knew a lot about him, and so I was able to really carry the conversation. And I had also had Joe Bellino, who was the 1960 Heisman Trophy winner from the Naval Academy, and he and Staubach were friends. And so I was able to use that relationship to get Staubach and also, to talk about the Naval Academy and his service.
When you first started, did you just obsessively prepare for your show and you wanted to have no stone unturned? I know I did.
Yeah, I did. And, I still try to do that because the more you know, I think one of the highlights of my show was when I had Danny Wuerffel on, and he had written a book, and I had not gotten the book yet. And I asked him, I said, Danny, you always seem to come through in the toughest moments, the most pressure-packed moments. And to me, it was because of your Christian faith that football wasn't that important to you, and it allowed you to perform without that pressure. And he stopped and he said, have you read my book? And I said, no. He said, that's in the book. And so I thought, that's pretty neat that I had that observation, and he believed, he thought I was right.
Yeah. Has your show prep gotten easier as you've done this for 20 years?
Yes.
And wait, you just said don't ask any open or yes or no questions. You just answered yes.
Well, it has, because I think I know what to ask.
Right.
And I know where to look. And I've been able to dig stuff up that maybe they didn't know. Maybe I've got a contact somewhere that can tell me a story about somebody.
Right. I do think it's a sign of respect that you do show prep before you have someone on. You don't just wing it, that you do a little research. You don't have to spend hours and hours. But when we first started, I was doing 6 or 7 hours to do 1 hour's worth of show just in prep. Eli had the same amount of time, editing it and all of that. And as you get more comfortable doing this, as you're 20-year veteran and now a Hall of Famer, it does make it easier, and you figure out what you don't need to ask or how you can ask it or whatever. So
you're exactly right. And, the context of the way you ask a question can make a big difference in the answer that you're going to get.
Right. Who's been your harshest critic of your program?
Probably my grandson.
Really? Really?
And I've had him on the show. He's 17 now.
Okay.
And so, he's full of vim and vigor.
Mine has probably been my brother Rick and my daughter Hannah. And they give me, regrettably, I've asked for criticism and tell me what they think, and they don't hold anything back. My son, he just says, that is a great show. And that's all I wanted to hear. But my daughter and Rick have, and they've actually made me better, and Rick's wife, Julie, has helped me with some questions as well. What did your grandson say about your show?
Well, he and I get into it about the greatest basketball player of all time. And of course, he says that it's Michael Jordan. And I believe that there's a herd mentality among sports broadcasters and writers. And so I said, okay, who do you think is the greatest quarterback of all time? And he said, well, Tom Brady. I said, why? He said, because he's won the most championships. I said, thank you. The greatest basketball player of all time is Bill Russell.
Right.
Bill Russell won back-to-back championships in college at a place that never won before, hasn't won since, at the University of San Francisco. Jordan won one time at a basketball powerhouse. And I said, Jordan was there 5 years before he won a championship. Russell came into the league, had won an Olympic gold medal, came into the league, won a championship his first year with the Celtics, who had never won anything before. And he played 13 years and won 11 championships, including 8 in a row.
What'd your grandson say to that?
He said, the league was so easy back then. He wasn't going to back down.
Well, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, is who you thought was the greatest basketball player, and obviously your Bill Russell is your name. Where do you think Maravich ranks in that?
I think Maravich was one of the great offensive players of all time. He was never on a really good team in the NBA, and not really on a good team.
And that makes a difference, how you're perceived as a basketball star.
Yeah, it really does. And I mean, you look at Jordan. Jordan, certainly a great player, but until they got the complementary pieces around him, they didn't win.
Right.
And Russell was that piece with the Celtics.
We had Otis Birdsong on in the fall, and he was a god to us over in Winter Haven when we were kids and graduated.
Tweet.
Yeah. And he went on to play in the NBA, and just a fantastic person. But he was more proud of his defense. And we always just thought of Otis as just all you do was shoot. And it was like, Todd, that's not like that. He took more pride in guarding some of the superstars in the world that we've all heard of. And you could just see his face light up about that. And he tells stories about guarding Larry Bird and some of the other guys. And he was he thought George Gervin was the best he had to play against. Could always score. He could score from anywhere.
Oh, yeah, he was an amazing player. Came out of the ABA and came into the NBA and didn't miss a beat.
Todd's podcast is sponsored in part by Saunders Real Estate, your trusted partner in land and commercial real estate since 1996. With over 125 expert advisors located throughout the Southeast United States, the full-service brokerage specializes in a wide range of property types from farms and ranches to commercial buildings and development land. If you're looking to build your legacy with a confident investment, please visit SaundersRealEstate.com or call 877-518-5263 to connect with an advisor today. Have you done your show for 20 straight years? Have you ever taken a hiatus? Do you board shows if you're not there? Do you have a co-host?
Yes, I do now. And Coach Joe McCarthy is a good friend of mine. I brought him in to do some shows when I was going to be gone. And I had him come in as a co-host, and he's very knowledgeable, and he's articulate, and so I just enjoy having him, and he's done a great job, and he hosts the show when I'm not there.
Have you ever been stuck for a guest and said, who are we going to have on tonight?
Yes.
And is that when you just wing it, or
yes.
Do you have Joe call in and say, hey, this is someone famous? And
we do have some callers. We have the fabled counselor, and he's a lawyer friend of ours, and he loves to talk. And so
Is he nameless at this point?
Oh, Rusty Franklin.
Okay.
And Rusty loves to talk, and he calls in. He's very colorful, so we have him call in. Or it's easy for us to carry an hour.
Yeah. And again, I think that's the difference between a radio show that has a time block versus ours. Sometimes we're 45 minutes, 48 minutes. We've gone an hour and 20, hour and 30 minutes before. So it's really just up to the guest how long we talk and how much fun we're having. Have you ever done a best of show?
We haven't. We're actually doing something along those lines. I did not want to do this. I find it self-serving, but they want to do a 2-hour show about my Hall of Fame induction. I really
Only
didn't.
2 hours?
Yeah.
20 years?
That's insulting. And
yeah. So when is that coming out?
Well, it will have already happened by the time that this airs.
Okay.
And
so it was the greatest show ever then, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it was.
It was the greatest
without
show
a doubt.
Well, I mean, to be on the air for 20 years around here is phenomenal. You're, a great friend, great leader in our community, and be recognized into the Polk County Sports Hall of Fame. I think that's a wonderful honor, and it's a testament to how much you've created and how much you meant to sports in Polk County.
Well, I'm honored that they would want to have me in there with people like Otis Birdsong, Paul Ettinger, who's going to go in the next class.
Is he in your class?
Yes.
Who all is in your class?
Paul Ettinger. I don't remember all the others.
Okay.
There's a basketball coach from Lake Gibson, and George Jenkins, Gary, I can't remember his last name. But I think there's 4 or 5 of us going in.
I've been to the banquet a few times, and some of them are pretty fun. And some of them are just like, holy cow, I didn't know this guy or this gal even lived in our community. And so, I mean, it really is a big honor that's happening. Let's talk a little bit about who are some of the biggest names you've had on your show?
Without a doubt, the biggest name would have to be John Wooden. And the way that came about, a friend of mine, a young man, had helped co-host with me. I'd brought him in and he was like in high school at the time. Well, when he graduated from the University of Florida, he ended up having an ESPN show over in Orlando. And he asked me to come over and co-host with him. And I said, I've got a contact with a guy with the Magic and Pat Williams, and he owes me a favor. And so he had a show, and he'd had John Wooden on, and he said, Ron, if I can ever help you, let me know. So I called him and said, hey, Pat, guess what? And so he gave me John Wooden's home phone number. And I called, and I called, tried to get him on my show, and he never answered. I got an answering machine. Well,
honey, who's this guy, Ronnie Ocean, trying to get me on his show?
Exactly. Well, I called him and I said, Coach Wooden, this is Ronnie Ocean from ESPN Radio. And between ESPN and radio, he picked up the phone. And he couldn't do the ESPN show, but he could do my show. And so he came on my little old radio show. He didn't even ask. And he and Tom Lasorda is another one. Tom Lasorda was so gracious. You know, here's a guy who was at the top of his game. Yeah. And this guy came on my radio show in Lakeland, Florida, had no connection to it whatsoever, wasn't going to do him any good. And he came on, and it just touched my heart that he did that.
How much time did he give you?
Oh, he gave me 15 minutes, which is about a segment.
Right.
And he was so funny. He told so many great stories.
Well, he was a talker.
Oh, he was.
Yeah, he was a great talker.
He was. 15 minutes wasn't enough.
Yeah. Who was your hardest interview that you ever had to talk to?
You know, it wasn't on my show. Probably the hardest one. I used to do Centel Cablevision back when Centel had the cable television, and we did a game of the week on high school football. And we had an offensive lineman who was the player of the game. And, you know, he and I were talking before we went on camera, and he didn't have any trouble at all. And so I asked him a question, he froze up. And, you know, fortunately it was recorded.
Right.
So we were able to break and, you know, give him time to calm down, but he just couldn't talk.
Yeah, most of the people I've had on are used to talking in public and used to being behind a microphone. So it's not for everybody, but it is a little bit of an art. But it is kind of hard when you get someone that's like, can you stretch that answer out just a little bit? You know, we're recorded, so we can do something and we can cut things up. But, you know, you're live on air. It's like, what are we going to do with the next 50 minutes if this guy is yes or no-ing me to death?
Exactly.
Who was the best person you ever interviewed? Not like John Wooden, but who was like someone you just had a ball with?
One of the guys would be Nick Belmonte.
I don't know.
He played baseball at the University of Florida, and he does broadcasts for ESPN. He does some scouting. He's a very colorful guy. And Nick still holds a stolen base record at the University of Florida for a single season back in 1976. And he is hilarious. He's got so many different lines that he uses. And one of them I thought was pretty good. He was talking about this hitter that the pitcher couldn't get him out. He said, he's harder to get out than red wine stains out of a white carpet.
My partner Dean has weird statements like that. It's like, man, where do you pull these things from? Some he'd get from Lawton Chiles, some he'd get from just growing up in Claremont, and some just from being a legislator for 8 years. You're a big Gator fan. Thank you. Appreciate that. You're wearing your Gator shirt, Gator blue today.
Oh, yeah.
You're the founding member or a founding member of the Polk County Gator Club. Do you consider yourself like a Gator sports historian, or are you just a fan? Do you pay attention to all the details?
No, I've read a lot about it. Okay. I think I know a lot about the history. And that's one of the problems I have with today's sportscasters. You know, I think they suffer from a disease I call muscular recentitis. And they only know about the guys. Maybe they know about the guys from the ESPN era, but they don't know anything about the history.
Yeah.
You know, the other day, one of them was talking about in Fenway Park, you've been there, in the right field corner, there's a pesky pole, and it's only about 300 feet down that right field line.
Right.
One of the Red Sox hitters hit a home run there, a walk-off home run, and it fell into the first row, and he said, that's the shortest home run in the history of baseball. Well, back in the day, when the Dodgers played in the Coliseum before they built Chavez Ravine, you know, back when they had some of the stadiums that were built, like the Polo Grounds, that were built to fit in between streets, one of the things that they did is center field might be very deep, but it might be very short down the lines.
Right.
Maybe less than 300 feet.
Right.
And so they just don't know that because they haven't studied it.
Right.
And I've studied a lot about Gator history, and I know a lot about it.
So a lot of people, their information's a mile wide and an inch deep, kind of like some of these ESPN guys.
Exactly.
They know a lot of what's been told them, but they've never done the deep dive into the research. We're going to talk a little bit more about Gators than anything else today, just because you is and I is. So if you don't like it, we hope you'll still listen, because you'll find out some fun things. Who do you think was our greatest coach?
That's a tough thing, because Steve Spurrier got it started. And Steve Spurrier changed the mindset of Gator football. Back then we always think, oh, golly, we can't beat Georgia and Jacksonville. And he just simplified things. He said, look, they get on a plane, we get on a bus. He said, Jacksonville is in Florida. We're the Florida Gators. He said, there's no reason we can't beat them.
Right.
And, the mindset, you hear his players talk about the mindset, his confidence, and how it was instilled in the players. And they were just as cocky as he was.
Yeah, and just always competitive. I mean, my older brother's played golf with him and watches them play ping pong, and he plays for blood in ping pong. It's like, holy cow, why aren't you just out and taking a powder? And he just doesn't want to do that. And we've got David Hitchcock, one of our super agents here in our office. We're going to be talking to him coming up about his days as a Gator. He was there in the early 70s and an outstanding Gator, MVP, Defensive Player of the Year. So he'll be fun to talk to. And I'll probably ask him the same thing. And Ray Graves was certainly a coach. It almost seemed like the Gators accepted mediocrity as opposed to we should be striving for more. And like you said, Spurrier kind of changed that mindset. What are your thoughts on Bobby Bowden?
Bobby Bowden, I had him on my show. And I always thought Bobby Bowden came along at just the right time, because the Gators had beaten them 5 years in a row.
Right.
And they were about ready to fire him. And the probation came, and that opened the floodgates for Florida State. And we were all doing the same thing. Florida State was doing exactly the same thing that Florida was. They just didn't get caught. And,
It wasn't the Free Shoes episode, was it? Free Shoes You or something like that?
They did a whole lot more than that.
I
But
understand.
Bobby Bowden got away with a lot because of that, oh, shucks, oh,
Right.
that's a rule? I didn't know that was a rule.
I won't do it again.
Gummit.
As a Gator fan, I've never liked Bobby Bowden until I watched the movie We Are Marshall. And I watched that, and it changed my opinion of him. I don't know if that was an accurate portrayal of Bobby Bowden at the time. I shouldn't call him Bobby, Coach Bowden. But if it was, it's like there's a man with humanity, and there's a lot more to him than just hating him as a Gator. You had to respect him as a winning football coach.
Oh, yeah.
And, all of us have great friends that are FSU fans that, when they were winning everything, they were crowing loud, and it's kind of fun that they're not crowing quite so loud. And we all have our time at the top of the mountain. So was Bobby Bowden humble? Did he offer any insights into like winning in life?
He was very charismatic.
Yeah.
When I had him on, I'd always really disliked him because of being a Gator.
Of course.
And in talking to him, not in person, but on the phone, I could see how people, were taken in by him because he's very charismatic and he has that, homespun,
Right.
aw shucks personality. And he was just, I think he was a very great guy. I don't think he would have been as great had Florida not gone on probation when they did.
Hey, listeners.
Hey, everyone.
Hola.
Hi, all.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, this is Rob Palumbo.
This is Fred Hyde.
This is Juliet Ashley Vide.
Dr. Angela Garcia Falconetti.
This is Congressman Scott Franklin.
This is Margie Grant.
This is Jake Palumbo.
And I want to thank you for listening to Todd's podcast.
Thank you for listening to Todd's podcast.
Thank you for listening to Todd's podcast.
Please make sure that you like and or subscribe.
Don't forget
Don't forget
to subscribe to Todd's podcast on your favorite podcast app. Tune in and listen.
Join in and listen to us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
When we were talking before the show, you had talked about a Earl Weaver story. Can you tell that story again?
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty funny.
For those that remember Earl Weaver, he was a very fiery manager for the Baltimore Orioles. And they had a guy named Jim Palmer.
Like the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was
And
like
Palmer
a little
was.
Banny Rooster.
Yeah. And you remember Palmer from the
Yeah.
underwear ads that he did. Well, he was very
Weren't you the stand-in for him in the underwear?
Yes, exactly.
When they just had to do a headshot, they used Jim, but the body was yours?
Not a lot of people know that. But Palmer was very egotistical. So he went out one day and he had a game where he'd given up like 8 runs in 3 innings. So Weaver comes out of the dugout to take him out of the game. Palmer says, "What are you doing out here? I'm not tired." Weaver says, "Yeah, I know, but the outfielders are."
That is a great story. I love that one. What are your feelings on Pete Rose finally getting into the Hall? Or being eligible to get into the Hall, I should say.
You know, I have mixed feelings about that. What he did goes to the very core of the game. And it was a lifetime ban. Did that mean as long as he was alive? Or did that mean
Forever.
After he died, you know, he's eligible? I don't know what they meant because Faye Vincent is dead and we'll never know what he actually meant by that. I wouldn't really have a problem with him getting in, except I don't really want the steroid guys to get in there. And they're going to get in there because these young guys don't see the game the same way that the older writers do. And the older writers and the baseball writers of America are keeping those guys out.
Right. Talking to Jimmy Rabe, Smoking Jim's Barbecue, he was on a couple of episodes ago, and he felt like Rose should get in because what happens on the baseball field, that's what you should be judged on. You know, very few of them are choir boys, and, you know, he had overlooked that. He felt like he earned it on the field. And I asked him about the steroid guys, and he said he thinks eventually they will probably get in. You know, I don't know, maybe they all have to die and be a generation, but at some point they may get in. But he said, Todd, everybody was doing it back when they were doing it too. They just got caught.
I don't know if all of them were doing it. I've had Andy McGaffigan, former Major League pitcher, on my show, and he didn't do it. And he said there were a lot of guys that were not doing it, and that he always felt kind of like, you know, that's cheating and it shouldn't be done. And, I mean, you look at Barry Bonds' statistics, and Barry Bonds was hitting like 24, 25 home runs, and all of a sudden he's hitting 50. And, you know, there were a lot of guys.
Brady Anderson.
I actually interviewed him when he was with the Winter Haven Red Sox.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was doing nothing, and all of a sudden he hit over 50.
Yeah.
Did he hit over 50 twice?
I know he did once.
Yeah,
I don't know if he did it
once.
twice, but
Who do you think was the greatest golfer?
the greatest golfer, it depends on what your criteria is. I think you'd have to say Jack Nicklaus because of all the majors he won, and he finished second a whole bunch of
20 times.
Yeah. And the guy, I've met him in person. He's not very big. I bet he's 5'7", 5'8".
Really?
Yeah, he's not very big. But boy, he could hit the golf ball back then, even with those old persimmon woods that they had. And, you know, Tiger Woods was certainly great for a while. I don't know. You wonder with Tiger Woods, how is it that one guy is all of a sudden so much better than everybody else?
Yeah. Is it that once-in-a-generation type person that comes along that
Could
just
be.
is? You mentioned persimmon. I got a Christmas present from my mom and dad, persimmon head woods. Got 3 of them, and I loved them. And I played well with them. And then I got married, had a son, and I came home, and he's out back hitting rocks with my persimmon head. He didn't have the driver, but he destroyed like a 3-wood and a 4-wood. And I said, Jacob, what in the heck are you doing? He said, I'm hitting rocks with these woods. And I just went, oh my gosh. I don't even think they can fix them anymore. So, but he was just hitting rocks in the backyard, and he was making contact apparently, but they didn't agree with it. How about the greatest tennis player?
Oh, gosh. You know, I don't know that much about tennis, to be honest. You go back, Rod Laver was a great one.
Yeah.
Pete Sampras was great. Bjorn Borg was great. Gosh, I don't know.
Is it fair to compare people of different eras, or do you just have to, because, hey, these guys are so much bigger and stronger now than they were in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and, you know, everybody had to play against whoever they were playing against at the time. You played against your competition.
I'm glad you asked that. Joe Bellino, the 1960 Heisman Trophy winner, was on my show. And my theory has always been, if you were great then, you'd be great now. The reason being that the people now are bigger, faster, and stronger. But if you'd been born back then, you wouldn't have been bigger, faster, and stronger.
Right.
And those guys, I asked Bellino about that, and I said, I believe you'd have been great today. He said, it's funny you say that. He said, I was on a national show, and the guy said, well, you couldn't play today because you only weighed 185 pounds. He said, well, let me tell you this. He said, I played 58 minutes of every football game. He said, I was on the kickoff coverage team, kickoff return team, punt return team. He said, I played 58 minutes. You let me drag some of these 300-pounders up and down the field for 58 minutes.
Right.
We'll see who the football player is.
Yeah, I think it is all relative. You will always have someone who's bigger and stronger, but do they have the want to? Do they have the innate ability to make a big difference with it? So here's a question from Sarah from Connecticut. Do you watch the WNBA?
I do not. I don't know. I just never caught on with me.
Well, I mentioned Otis Birdsong. He's a huge fan of the WNBA. He said he watches that more than the men's league, and he's just very high on it. I don't think I've ever watched more than a minute of it, but here's a former pro basketball player who knows more about basketball than any of us will ever dream of, and he's a huge fan of it. So
Otis was a great guest on my show. That guy's very articulate.
Yep.
He's not you hear the stereotypical dumb jock. He's not that.
Right.
And you and I are good friends with his brother, Nat, and that whole family. For what I know of them, they're great people.
Every one of them.
Articulate, very intelligent.
Yeah. There were 10 brothers and sisters. Nat's the oldest. Their father died when I think Otis was like 7 years old, something like that. And Nat and his mom made sure every one of those kids went to college. They had one sister that had some physical challenges, and she was not able to go. But all 9 of them, they were able to get through college one way or the other, get educated, and have gone on to live great, productive lives. So great story with Otis. Here's one from a guy named Heavy Duty. This must be a Lakeland dude. I don't know if you know a guy named Heavy Duty.
Is this coming in from Weight Watchers?
No. This is a guy named Heavy Duty. I'm sure he's legitimate. He wants to know, what is the greatest ballpark food ever?
Oh, my gosh. I'd have to say a Fenway Frank.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not exactly, fine dining is wasted on me. I'm just Dan and Mike's boy from East Lakeland. And, I'm a beans and taters kind of guy. I'll tell you this story. We went over to London recently, and you know where I ate? Burger King. And my buddies have torn me up about that.
They should. They
should.
It's like, oh, my gosh. So ketchup is like a condiment to you that is rivaled by no other then.
Oh, exactly. I heard somebody say that, back when I was a kid, said we didn't have cholesterol.
Yeah.
Said if we did, said Mama would have just fried it up and put gravy on it.
And put a little butter with it, too.
That's right.
And, to me, it might have been the Cokes they served at University of Florida at Gainesville Field. They were these big, large plastic cups and had these big, huge lids on them. And these lids, I think at the end of the third quarter, everyone started throwing them like Frisbees. And they're going all over the place. You had already graduated by then, I think. But it was hilarious. And these Cokes were perfect size because you could drink a little bit of it, pour a little bit of it out, and then take a little bit of that Lord Calvert you had smuggled in through your plastic Gator hat. At least this is what Heavy Duty says. And it would make a great mixed drink, and you do several of those, and you really didn't care if you got hit in the face with a plastic top.
Well, a little bit of Gator history. Those lids contributed to the injury of Stacy Simmons, who was a Gator great back in the 70s. When we had that old AstroTurf field, he slipped on one of those, making a cut, tore up his knee, and was never the same again.
And that may be when they went to the cellophane plastic top, and they did it just to keep them from spilling, I think.
Exactly.
I don't know if they kept any, coolness in there, but, Heavy Duty was pretty specific about his cocktails, about mixing those things up. So, Heavy, thank you for calling in. And here's one from Mad Dog. He wants to know, who's the most overrated sportscaster, in your opinion? I've got mine, but I'll listen to you. And you are not it.
I'm not it.
You are Hall of Fame, baby.
Well,
I'm in high cotton with you.
I would say Gene Deckerhoff.
Really? I love him.
Gene Deckerhoff graduated from the University of Florida.
Turncoat.
And he never mentions that.
Right. I didn't know that.
I always wanted to call the Bobby Bowden show and say, Gene, I never heard you say, where did you go to college? I guess it's because I dislike FSU so much that I didn't like Gene Deckerhoff, and I didn't like him doing Bucks games.
Yeah. I thought he was an incredible announcer, and he could make a Bucks game exciting. Just the tone of his voice, and I think that's a mark of a great broadcaster is being able to draw you into that game, whether you're listening, especially on the radio. If you're not able to visualize it, they paint that picture. To me, mine's probably Bob Costas. He's just seemed to have gotten a little too preachy for me lately. I really enjoyed him when he first started off, but now he's too political. And it's like, man, just call sports. We don't really need to hear your opinion on that. That's just my opinion.
I have to totally agree with you about Costas. You're right. He's gotten so political that he's lost sight of the sports, because he used to do some really great interviews.
Right.
And he was always prepared.
Yeah. Who was your most disappointing coach for the Gators?
Probably Will Muschamp.
Did you have low expectations when he came in, or you had high expectations and he just didn't meet them?
I had high expectations because, he was the heir apparent at the University of Texas. He was the coach in waiting, and he was the hot topic. Everybody wanted him.
Right.
And he came in, and his problem was that he muzzled the offensive coordinators. The first year he came in, we won 11 games, and he still had all of Urban Meyer's players.
Right.
And once that was gone, he just muzzled. He went through several different offensive coordinators, and it was always the same.
Yeah.
The offense would go out there, and he'd say, "You guys go out there and hold them, okay?"
To the offense.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
No, he didn't want the defense put in a bad position.
Really? That would understand why that would spell his demise. How about the Gators' future under our current coach?
I love Billy Napier. I think he's done a great job of recruiting. He's done a great job of organization. And he must be a pretty good motivator because, last year to hold that team together
right.
through all of the difficulties they had and then to win the 4 straight at the end.
Yeah.
My problem with him is he's so conservative as an offensive play caller.
Right.
And I think if he would bring in an offensive coordinator, that program could really take off and go places.
It seems like with the talent they're always having, let the boys fly, let the boys run, let them go, and see what happens. And it's almost like if you go down, running wide open, at least you've given it all instead of, 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Well, exactly. And you look at the way that was one of the strengths that Spurrier had. He used to confound Phil Fulmer. It just couldn't believe it. Fulmer wanted
Which was great.
Yeah, oh yeah, because he wanted to play that 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And Spurrier would just go out there and he's throwing the ball all around. Before you know it, it's 21-0, and Fulmer can't play that game anymore.
Tell me about Eric Russell. We had talked about him.
Irk Russell.
Irk?
Yeah, Irk.
Okay, I didn't know him. Apparently, I don't even know how to say his name, but you had a great story about him. Tell us who he is and tell us.
Irk Russell was the defensive coordinator for the University of Georgia Junkyard Dogs back in the 80s. And this guy had his head shaved, and he would bump heads, do head smacks with defensive players that had their helmets on. And he'd be bleeding down his nose, and he was fiery. Man, he could get teams so motivated. And so he went to Georgia Southern, and he went down there to start the program down there. And one of my buddies that had gone there told me, said, you ought to get Irk Russell on. And I said, okay, I'd love to have him on. So I called his house, and his wife says, Irk, get in here. Some guy wants to talk to you. So he comes in there, and he starts telling me stories about, he said, this college team hired this coach and said, Coach, we're behind you, win or tie. And he told another great story about they were playing a playoff game in Division II, and they were getting beat at home. And on the campus there, they had a drainage ditch, and he called it Beautiful Eagle Creek. And so his team just was not playing very well. It was a lackluster effort. And so he comes in, he says, guys, he said, I want to tell you something. He said, there's 3 things a Southern man won't put up with. He said, somebody saying something bad about the Lord, about your mama. He said, or peeing in Eagle Creek. Those guys peed in Eagle Creek. And he said they went out and beat the crap out of that
Oh, my
team.
gosh. Eli, maybe you can shave your head and start doing a little head bumping around here with some of the other staff. We'll see how motivated you can get them.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Hey everybody, this is your host Todd Dantzler. As most of you know, I'm a partner with Saunders Real Estate and have been a very active and working broker for over 42 years. I have fostered strong relationships throughout the state of Florida, working on properties ranging from agriculture and development land to multifamily, commercial, and industrial projects. If you have any real estate needs at all, please give me a call. I'd love to help. My direct line is 863-877-2846. Thank you. Who was the best coach you feel like you ever heard? You didn't have to meet him. That was the greatest motivator of their players, men or women. It doesn't matter.
I have to say Steve Spurrier.
Okay.
You know, the way that he changed the mindset at Florida. And to me, you know, we tend to think of a great motivator as somebody that's a yeller and a screamer.
Right.
He wasn't that way. He did what I think was his key, is keeping an even keel. And I got to be good friends with Lawson Holland, the late Lawson Holland, who was one of his assistant coaches. And he said what he thought Spurrier's strength was, when they had a big win, the practices were hard as they could be the next week. Because he knew that history at Florida, that was what had happened. You win this week and you get beat by Podunk U the next week. And he said when they had a tough loss, he said the practices were easier and a lot more fun.
To change their mindset.
Yeah, to change
They're
their
all
mindset.
super athletes at that point. I mean, you're not going to make them bigger, better, stronger in a week. You got to change that mindset. I enjoyed how he always seemed to get under Bobby Bowden's skin.
Oh, yeah.
That was always fun for me.
Oh, yeah.
What is the funniest sports story you have ever heard or ever been told? And that's very subjective, but.
Oh, man, that's a tough one. One of the ones, of course, is the Earl Weaver story. Another one would be one that Tom Lasorda told me. You know, he did not like Reggie Jackson because Tom Lasorda was a guy who had just barely made it to the major leagues. And, you know, he didn't quite have the ability. He got cut because of a guy named Sandy Koufax.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so he had an appreciation for guys that hustled. And he didn't think that Reggie Jackson hustled. So Reggie Jackson said something, Tom Lasorda said something about Reggie Jackson, and Reggie Jackson, somebody said, well, I heard you call Reggie Jackson a dog. Tom Lasorda said, no, I would never call him a dog. He said, at least a dog will chase a ball.
What else?
You know, one of the things that I really valued is being able to get to know some of the people. There was a guy named Gene Conley. Gene Conley is the only guy in the history of sports to win a basketball championship in the NBA and Major League Baseball. He was a pitcher on the 57 Braves, and he played with the Celtics behind Bill Russell. And this guy wrote a book, and he lived in Claremont.
Right.
And I got to know him and just had so much fun with him. And, you know, he was just such a gracious human being, and getting to know Steve Spurrier a lot better. He was always one of my childhood heroes. My first Gator game was in 1960.
Good Lord, how old are you, Ron? No wonder the 90-year-old women are chasing after you.
I'm 75. And, you know, Larry Libertor was the quarterback. And one of the big thrills that I had was Larry Libertor was in my Rotary Club. And Larry Libertor, we played at a flag football team. And I was the quarterback and threw him a touchdown pass. And that was a big thrill to me.
What else have we not talked about that you want to talk about? I mean, what have we left off?
And I think, and you know this, that your kids achieving success.
Greatest thing ever.
Yeah, there's nothing better than that. And it's a lot more important than you achieving individual success. You know, my daughter, she went to law school. She's a judge in Tallahassee. She's got two wonderful grandsons that she gave me, and she and her husband are great parents. And my son, he didn't want to go to college, but he always had a mechanical aptitude. And he wrote a letter to Bernie Little when he was 15 years old, and he said, you know, I'd like to come to work for you out at the airport. He said, I'll work for free. I'll do anything to get to work for you. And it took Bernie Little by surprise, and he called him up and he said, son, he said, you come on out here. He says, we need more hanger rats out here. So he went out there and started working on his helicopters and his jets, and Bernie took him under his wing. And today he's the president of that company, Dixie Jet and Rotor.
Wow.
He worked his way up. He never wanted to go to college, but he had a mechanical aptitude. When he was about 11 years old, he took the governor off my riding lawnmower and blew it up, racing his buddy.
I swear I think your kids are a mirror of mine. My daughter is an attorney, very successful attorney with Morgan & Morgan in Orlando, and has done very well in school. 2 boys, great husband. And my son didn't really care for school. He tried it, but he's got his A&P license. And
Same business.
Same thing. He took my dad's riding lawnmower apart back when he was a little boy. I mean, like 10, 11. And he got about 95% of the pieces back together. And my dad said, Todd, what am I supposed to do with this? There's extra pieces laying around. I said, Dad, I don't know. He did it when I wasn't even looking. So that was a new riding lawnmower. But it is. Your children give you pride. And when they're successful, you feel like you've done pretty well. So what's next for you now that you've retired? I want one more sports question. Are you a Red Sox or a Tigers fan? Because you live here in Lakeland, where the Tigers do spring training, but you've got some Red Sox stories. Are you a Red Sox or a Tigers fan?
I don't change teams. Even when my teams are bad, I don't change. In about 1956, when I was a kid, we went and visited my cousin in Boston. My favorite color was always red. We went by Fenway Park, and I think that's how I got to be a Red Sox fan. And I remember there was an old story about an old Red Sox fan. He said, those dadgum Red Sox. He said, they killed my father, and now they're after me.
Being a Red Sox fan was a lot like being a Gator fan until they finally won it all. And it's like, okay, you can do this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In the most unlikely possible way.
Right.
The Yankees had always been their tormentors, and they end up beating the Yankees after being down 0-3, which had never happened in the history of baseball. And then they win the World Series. I cried. I really cried.
I didn't cry. I was happy. I'm not quite invested like you are, Ron. But that's probably why you're a Sports Hall of Fame radio broadcaster, and I'm schlepping away in a podcast room with Eli, who won't shave his head for being dedicated for the team. I mean, that's what I'm working with here. Sarah knows where she's coming from. What's next for you since you've retired? I mean, I know you're 8-9 years into it. Have you ever thought about politics? Because you would be good at it.
No, I would not be good at it. I'm way too opinionated, and I'm probably right of Genghis Khan, and that might not work too well in today's environment. What I do is, one of the blessings that I've had is 5 days a week, there's a group called the Chicken Club. Started back in the 70s when they used to have fried chicken at Vito's restaurant on Thursday, and we used to meet there. And so for 50 years on and off, we've had lunch together. Now we're all retired. 5 days a week, we go to different restaurants. And it's good to sit there and tell stories about how good you used to be.
Talk about whose cholesterol medicine is working and whose blood pressure of all that fried chicken you ate for all those years.
Exactly.
I think you would be great at politics. It's okay to be opinionated. You just have to be open-minded while doing it. I didn't think I could do it. I did 8 years, and I enjoyed it. It gave me a perspective on life that I did not enjoy. It made me a better listener, because that's a big part of what you have to do. I think you would be great at it. If you do it, I would hope you do something local. I know I'm not going to convince you of it right now, but certainly either in Lakeland or Polk County. You don't have to go to Tallahassee. You don't have to go to D.C. to make a difference. I think you'd be wonderful at it.
Well, I admire you for doing that, taking a leadership role. And you've always been a leader, and your whole family.
Well, thanks. Tell us what it means to be selected into the Hall of Fame. You're not inducted as of the recording, but you will by the time we play it. What's it mean to be selected?
What a tremendous honor it is to be inducted. And I'm going as a contributor. And what that means is that, the fact that I was all neighborhood third team honorable mention for 3 years in a row in baseball and football.
Because Mary was sick that day.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. My athletic abilities didn't get me in there. But the fact that they thought that the show was consequential and that, they respected me enough to do that, that's a tremendous honor.
I was I didn't cry, but I was extremely happy when I saw the news that you got it. And I immediately said, hey, why don't you come on the podcast? So I do appreciate you coming on. I think it's a tribute to you, your personality, your perseverance, your dedication, and to just sports here in Polk County. You've been a great cheerleader for everyone who's played here, for the sports world. You brought a lot of fun into it. So congratulations from the bottom of my heart, from all the ATOs throughout the world. We're proud of you. You don't have to be on TV. You can have a face for radio and join into the Hall of Fame. And tell your brother Glenn hello for me. And I know your greatest achievement are probably your kids.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. You've had a few jobs, not a lot of jobs. I don't mean to say, oh, you can't keep a job, but you've been very successful in all of them. Being selected to the Hall of Fame's got to be a pretty darn good reward for 20 years of effort.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I mean, you look at the pantheon of people that are in that hall.
Right.
And you go, my goodness, they're going to put me up there with them?
Right. Yeah, that's the epitome. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy.
Exactly.
Mike Myers. And
it's a who's he in a Hall of Fame of who's who.
Okay, so how do we listen to your radio show in Winter Haven after 7 o'clock at night, or in Plant City on the other side of County Line Road, or Kathleen north of I-4? How can someone listen to your show?
Well, we're on Thursday nights, 8 to 9 p.m., 96.7 FM,
okay,
and 14:30 a.m. if you happen to be in the parking lot.
Okay, but you are on FM. Do they simulcast it on the internet?
No, we haven't gotten that yet. But
you've heard of the internet, right?
What's that?
Eli will explain it to you afterwards. He does all this stuff for me.
Once we get the Todd Dantzler Foundation and the millions invested there, we'll simulcast.
You get the second million after we put it into Todd's podcast. But I want to thank you for, one, being a friend. Thank you for coming on and making the podcast fun. We've laughed. We had some fun. Is there any regrets you had for coming on here?
No, not at all. Not at all. You're a cherished friend, as is your brother Rick, and I don't know the rest of your family that well. Did get to meet your dad. What a gentleman he was.
Yep. I wish he was still around to see what we've been doing.
Man, I tell you what, that guy was a pillar of Polk County.
Yep, he was good. But thanks for coming in. Thanks for listening. And I want to thank you, our listeners, for listening to each and every one of our podcasts. So as we sign off, I want to turn you on to a little bit of music. I've been trying to get some music. Eli won't give me any money to go buy a song or buy anything because we don't have a budget. We don't have the million jet that you seem to be professing. So after this episode, I want to encourage you to start listening to a little bit of music. So Todd's picks for today are Jethro Tull, formed back in 1967 in Blackpool, Lancashire. They had that toe tapper, Thick as a Brick, and Aqualung. And again, many people don't know what the song Aqualung was, but Ron Burgundy did it when he was playing the jazz flute in his show. And also, after you finish with Jethro Tull, listen to a little bit of Boston, the vocals of Bradley Delp, and the musical arrangements of Tom Scholz. They were formed back in '75. And my two favorite songs with them were More Than a Feeling and Let Me Take You Home Tonight. And with that, thank you for listening to Todd's podcast. I ask you to listen in the future, and we'll see you soon. Hey, everybody, I want to thank you for listening to Todd's podcast. This has been your host, Todd Dantzler. If you enjoyed this episode today, I hope you'll join us next time when we start talking with David Hitchcock, a friend, Florida Gator alumni, ATO, but he was a wonderful football player for the University of Florida in the early 70s, and we'll talk about stories from back then, people he played with, coaches he played with, state of the game, that kind of stuff. So I hope you'll enjoy it, and tune in next time for David Hitchcock. As always, don't forget to rate, review, follow, and subscribe to Todd's podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you have any questions for me or any suggestions for future guests, please call or text our number at 863-288-0944 or visit todddantzler.com. Again, that's 863-288-0944. 0944 or visit my website, TODDANTZLER.com. I look forward to hearing your questions and feedback, and please take care.